This is a series where I chat with scientists and those trained in STEM fields about their lives and hobbies that took a turn outside of traditional science and STEM fields. Welcome to Science and. Hi there. This is kind of weird. My name is Maisha Alexander, and I'm also known as the Rockstar Anthropologist. I get to welcome our first guest, and I want to start with kind of a story. If you don't know this, I am a nerd, a geek, if you will, and I'm also Black. I know. And this has always been a really interesting intersection to be a part of. A few years ago, and by a few, I mean like 8 or 10 years ago, it might have even been earlier than that. I was at a Harry Potter event with a friend of mine who has nerdy tendencies. And I don't know if she'd characterize herself as a nerd, but anyway, we were all dressed in our cloaks and our wands, obviously, as one does at a Harry Potter event. And what was also obvious was that the group that we were with, and it was like 200 or 300 people here, was a relatively homogenous group. I mean, it was really lacking in diversity. So we were all having fun, though, sort of united in our joy, our love of literature and magic. And my friend and I were having these conversations, and we were making jokes, and I came to a glaring realization that a lot of our references, our linguistic intonations, our vernacular, etc., was really rooted in our Blackness, and it didn't necessarily translate outside of us two, especially being two Black girls from Brooklyn. But I realized then that there's a uniqueness to bleak and blurred culture that's often not represented, and finding communities where nerds of color feel welcome can really be difficult. And it would seem that one such person was not only well aware of these kinds of tensions, but also set out to create an inclusive community where we all can feel welcome. And so it is truly an honor to be joined by the queen of Quirktastic community and the CEO of QuirkChat, B Law. I am so excited right now. It is such a privilege to meet you, and truly an honor for you to be one of the first guests for Science and I'm humbled that you are taking the time to join me on this journey today.
Oh my gosh, that was such a cool introduction and to learn more about you. So thank you so much for that. I love that you talked about your Harry Potter experience just because I've always been so jealous of people who are actually able to like read and watch Harry Potter. I was one of those unfortunate souls who was not. But that definitely like led my journey of wanting to kind of lean more into geekdom. But yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Oh my goodness. And I was going to ask you to introduce yourself a little bit more, but I have to know where did the Harry Potter like miss you?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So well, first off, hi everybody. I'm super excited to be here. A little bit about me is I grew up in a small town called Matthews, North Carolina. And one, there weren't that many Black people, and definitely not that many people who were Black and into anything geeky. If it wasn't Jesus or football, then it did not exist. And that kind of goes into why I was not able to read/watch Harry Potter until I think maybe high school or like when I was in college, because in my community, Harry Potter was seen as witchcraft. So if I actually remember going to the Scholastic Book Fair and saving up all of my lunch money to buy the first Harry Potter book. And I hid it underneath my bed. And of course, my mother found it and destroyed it. So that was like my introduction to Harry Potter and anything fantasy at the time. So that's the backstory. But obviously, I love it now. Yes, now I am very proud Ravenclaw. So.
Yeah, so before we get into Quirktastic, let's kind of start with who you are, what you do, and if you wouldn't mind giving me a brief overview of your pre-CEO career as a STEM professional.
Yes, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm the founder of QuirkChat and Quirktastic. QuirkChat is a video social network for people who are into anything fandom. We also have a very specific focus on being inclusive, especially for women, people of color, and members of the LGBT community. But before all of that, I actually graduated with a BS in biology and worked in cytogenetics for a while. So the goal was to, of course, go to medical school. I feel like everybody wants their child to go to medical school, but I was actually down for it. I took the MCAT, did well, everything that was like my trajectory. But in the meantime, I was working in cytogenetics. And for those who aren't exactly sure what cytogenetics is, basically think of cyto, cell, genetics. I was really focused on chromosome abnormalities. So if you recall in biology, you'd see these graphs of, or like just a chart of your chromosomes, karyotypes. I was the person who would take the blood samples, and typically the people who came to me were people that expected that their kids had special needs, such as autism, Down syndrome, or older people who were having fertility issues. I would take their blood samples and basically harvest the cells and see if there were any chromosome abnormalities that could prevent or cause any problems. So that's like my backstory when it comes to science.
So you start out being a parent's dream, and
What can I
when do
say?
you? My mom would have loved if I started there, but when do you kind of like decide that this is cool, liking science, liking the medical field? You took the MCAT and everything, which is no small feat. And then when do you decide I'm going to go do something else over here that is a lot more adventurous, a lot less stable, and I'm just going to hope that it's dope?
Oh yeah. Oh gosh. This let me go back in time. The year was, I'm just kidding. I can't remember what year. I think it was like 2017 when I decided to quit my job. It was definitely something that I mulled over for a while. And the reason that I was thinking of quitting my job, there were a few reasons. One, I was already working on a side project, which at the time was my blog, the precursor to Quirktastic. And it was doing really well. Like basically with that, it was a blog that talked about nerdy things, and I focused a lot on people of color, specifically Black people who were into nerdy concepts. And with that, like I remember getting like my first sponsored post as well as like getting ad revenue because I got accepted into a really cool like ad network. And I was like, oh wow, like I'm making money from this. I got invited to several events. Like this was really cool. So there kind of became this cognitive dissonance whenever I would come into the lab because I was working in the lab maybe 13 hours a day, second shift. So I'd be there until like 1 o'clock in the morning, just either in the lab or behind the microscope, which I personally liked because I am an introvert. So it's like I don't have to talk to anybody. It was really great. It was great for a while until it wasn't. And I know, like, with where I was, and just kind of giving context, this was around the time that Trump got elected, and also living in North Carolina. There is definitely people were more outward about their views when it comes to politics, and also their views when it comes to race relations. And it just kind of made for a toxic workplace, especially being one of the few Black women in science at or in the lab at my job. And with that, what I'm leading to is that the workplace got so toxic to where I just did not want to be there. I would have panic attacks in my car thinking about going to work because I was working with people who were very outward that they didn't appreciate the fact that I was there. And it got to the point where one person actually sabotaged my work. It was for a patient. And I think that's like kind of was the end for me of just like, you can have whatever you have against me as a person, you can say whatever, but when you go as far as to jeopardize a patient's result just because you decide to be petty, like, oh heck no. Like that was like the
Yeah.
last straw for me. So with that, I just remember talking to my family because I was supposed to be like the first doctor, the first scientist, the first whatever. And that was like something that had been drilled into me and my journey just growing up. And I remember kind of posing like a hypothetical situation to my mother of just like, oh, like, what would you do if like, I don't know, you're going to work and having panic attacks, but like you kind of need the money because of student loans, etc. Like just kind of putting that out there. And she was like, oh girl, you need to quit your job. You can always come back to science. Like you can figure something else out, but you need to quit that if it's making you this miserable. And that was something that, and for some reason in my mind, I never thought she would say, because like out of everybody at my family, she was the most of like, she's gonna be a doctor, she's a scientist, like super proud of that. So when I got her amen, I was like, all right, time to start making some plans. And another thing that led to that is I remember very distinctly, I was in one of the vent hoods listening to a podcast as I was working on a cell harvest. And I was listening to this podcast that Catherine Finney, who is like a tech genius, basically, she was working on this incubator that was specifically for Black and Latinx women and anyone who was like thinking of creating a business. And I remember thinking like, oh, I mean, I have a blog. I don't know if that constitutes as a business, but I am making money. I would love to do more about it. Let me just apply. And I remember before I even heard back about the program, I put in my 2 weeks notice. And literally the next day after putting in my 2 weeks notice, I found out that I got accepted into her program. So I was like, all right, I don't know what's going to happen, but the universe is obviously showing me a little bit of favor right now. Let's move on with it.
That is awesome. That's such an incredible story. And it definitely, I'm sure, resonates with a lot of people right now. I've noticed a lot more of my friends that are in academia, particularly the ones that are Black and people of color, are really being a lot more vocal about the abuses that they are facing in the labs, in the classrooms, in various programs that they're in.
Isn't that the worst though, where it's like you really love the work, but because of like the people who are at the job, it makes it almost unbearable. Like, and it's funny because like I had never thought that those things would affect me. Like, I mean, I'd been dealing with things like this my whole life. I'm like, I'm strong. Like, I don't care. People always talk about affirmative action is why I got here, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, you're just jealous, et cetera. So I never let it bother me. But in that moment, especially when my work was sabotaged, it was like enough. And I'm glad that people are being more vocal about what happens, especially in some like STEM careers, of like how this is affecting people who traditionally aren't seen in these roles.
So you leave, you get accepted to this incubator, which is pretty fantastic. And you go on to start I think it's Quirktastic Media, right before we get to QuirkChat. Is that correct?
That is correct, for sure.
Well, I definitely encountered Quirktastic first. You know, it's so funny when there's so few things in a particular space and you're looking for your people.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find your people, right?
Exactly.
And this is niche. Like I was like, okay, so where do the Black nerds hang out other than Afropunk, right?
Yes,
because
thank you.
I was like, here's the deal. I grew up with Afropunk. I am grateful. Whatever, Afropunk has always been like the place. And I'm from Brooklyn too. So I had that like overlap. I love rock music. I play rock guitar. Like it's my thing.
I love it.
I was not cool, right? Not to anybody else back then. And then I discovered Afropunk, and this became my community, which I am not cool enough for, right? I definitely felt
the exact same way. Like that was my one problem with Afropunk. I was like, wow, everybody here just randomly knows how to dress so well. Like, why am I not that person?
I know. So, you know, I thought that was a glaring indictment of myself. It isn't, right? It's a very open and wonderful community. But when I found Quirktastic, I felt a little bit more like, okay, I think these are my people. So let's talk about Quirktastic and how you decided not just to move this from a blog, but to move it from a blog into what it is now, which is a whole community and your QuirkChat product.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny. The reason that I first started Quirktastic was kind of like out of spite. I saw that there was this list of cosplayers that someone wrote, and it had like maybe like 50 to like 100 cosplayers on there, and they were saying like these were like the best cosplayers. And then I looked through the list and realized that none of them were people of color. Like barely even any of them were Asian. I'm just like, do y'all know where anime started? And you're not gonna put anybody on there who looks like, okay, that's your thing. So out of spite, I was like, you know what? I know where these people are. I'm gonna make a list. I think it was like an exorbitant list of like 200 cosplayers of color, and I was like, these are like the people you should follow. So I made like a blog post about it. I let all the people who were on the list know that like, hey, like you're on this list, I just wanted to highlight you. And with that, the post kind of went viral. Like I believe at the time it got like 500,000 plus views that month alone, and it just continued to get more views each month, to where I was like, wow, this is like, here's my community. These are the people that like are wanting more content like this. So I've had several different ideas of like how to actually utilize the community, as well as like to build for the community. And like my first idea was like, you know what? And this kind of goes back to like when I was doing more research of trying to find my own community. And like I've been around in the geek space for a while, to where I know like Reddit is a big thing, Facebook groups are a big thing, but I found that like when I joined these groups, harassment was so easily came to me. And like as soon as people found out that like I was a Black girl, etc., it was just like, oh, like you're Black, you can't cosplay, all this stuff. So I wanted to first like kind of shelter the community. It's like, I'm gonna just make a community for Black people. Maybe I'll even make it just for Black girls. That's all that it's gonna be. But then as I started building that product, I realized that we were kind of like being siloed to just the space, to where it wasn't really making a change in the problem that I was trying to face. Therefore, from that, I was like, you know what? I am going to build a product that I wish existed, to where it can be for everyone, but you're going to know that, like, if you're a person of color, a Black person, a woman, etc., that you are safe here, that like this is a place for you. So that's like what I went on to build. And after just talking to people at conventions, through the incubator, I had to do something called customer discovery, which is basically like when you just talk to people to see it, like if what you're building is like what they actually want, without asking leading questions. And like something that kept coming up was like, I just want to find my people. I just want to talk to other people who are similar to me. Like I'd love if there is like an app or something like that, to where I could just find my people. And at the time I was like, well, I don't know how to build an app, but I can make a blog. So that's what Quirktastic Media was. And even through Quirktastic Media, we had like a very short MVP stage where I use like WordPress plugins to make a kind of like a almost like a Facebook like social media thing, to where like you could log in and talk to people. And from those conversations, it was very short lived, but from that I realized that there was a community here that wanted like more of a social network to talk to people. So that like led on my quest to making QuirkChat. And at the beginning, QuirkChat was kind of like a friend finder, to where it was like we're basically kind of like a friendship Tinder. And the idea was like you could find your people if ever you wanted to go to cons, or like have people to talk to online. But then after the pandemic, I realized like, oh, cons are kind of not a thing right now. Like we need to pivot. And it was a scary pivot, but just really leaning in and talking to the community, we realized that that FaceTime of like actually being able to have video of people just talking, and really building a platform that was more modern compared to like the Reddits and the Facebook groups, is kind of where we win. And that's like been QuirkChat thus far, and it's been great, and we've been winning.
Yeah, I'll say you've been winning. Let's talk about a couple of the sort of accolades that you've had. So you were featured, I guess, this year on the Forbes Next 1,000 list.
Yeah, I actually got sent the list. Actually, okay, so I think the way that the process worked is that I think someone nominated me for the list, which I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. But then one day the list came out, and I got a reporter that sent me the list and was like, hey, you're on it. So that was honestly a big highlight, and something that I definitely needed, because I was feeling a little shaken once we first started to pivot QuirkChat after the pandemic. So I think getting that notification was just like, all right, we're still good. Like things are still going great for us.
In conjunction, you have all of these other really cool things happening too. So you get a chance to partner with a really awesome show, right? Lovecraft Country.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So yeah, I just kind of run down some of the wins that we've had because it's been so like honestly, it's been so many. Before even the Lovecraft partnership, we got an opportunity to where we were invested in by Snapchat. So that was like awesome for me, especially with us building a social network. It kind of gave us that just like that stamp from the community of like, okay, like we're doing something great in this space when it comes to social network. So that was great. And then during the pandemic was when the Lovecraft Country opportunity came, as well as like we also got an opportunity with Warner Brothers with DC Fandom. And what I think happened there was kind of like right place, right time. During the pandemic, a lot of what people don't realize is that one, there are several conventions that happen throughout the US and the world. And at these conventions, you have lots of media companies such as the HBOs, Warner Brothers, AMC, who are trying to promote their shows. And they spend a decent amount of money to promote their shows. But with this year, or I guess last year, when 2020 happened, all of the cons got wiped out. A lot of these platforms are realizing that they need to spend this money online and figure out unique ways for them to basically get people to watch their shows. So we were at the right place and right time because with QuirkChat, we allow people to put on their profile what they're interested in. They could also put their demographic information. And HBO was specifically looking for Black sci-fi nerds. And we, of course, from the profile, we're like, we can find
Ding,
a Black
ding,
sci-fi
ding.
nerd. We've got them. We've got them. So that was such a cool experience. We were able to do Ask Me Anythings with the cast members of Lovecraft Country. We even got to do a virtual reality concert with Janelle Monáe through it, and like just like so many cool things that they did. It was actually one of my favorite partnerships. So that was like really awesome.
That is fantastic. I love Janelle Monáe. So I think that is so awesome that you had that opportunity, and you've had lots of different opportunities. But again, I'm just so grateful for you and your team and really sort of servicing this space and the experience of being a Black or brown geek or nerd. And you've sort of talked about a little bit, you've sort of alluded to the harassment and the sort of inter and intra like community prejudice and bias that happens. So for managing your community, how do you deal with these issues, or have they even come up for you yet?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think one thing that's been coming up a lot, of course, like in our platform, thankfully, we haven't had too many issues when it comes to like race, ethnicity, etc. But one thing that does come up is misogyny, as well as issues with people who identify with different pronouns, such as like the non-binary, and also like even with like transgendered people. And what we've had to realize is that like some people kind of need to learn the lesson of like this is like how the world works right now. That's always been top priority for us. So when it comes to building features and prioritizing features, we're really prioritizing features that target these things. So for example, at the top of 2022, we partnered with a company that is really great at filtering out misogyny, which is great. Like they use AI to filter out misogyny, and like they really do a good job of like, based on the context of the conversation, seeing if a conversation is like between friends, if like you saying certain words that you would say between friends. So they take into consideration the relationship that you have with that person versus just true misogyny or racial tension and things like that, which I think is great technology. Definitely takes a lot of data, but it's great that like technology is coming this far. Also, we've been looking into ways to increase community self-moderation. So it's like, of course, we have our moderation team, but like we know that you want to protect your space as well on the platform. So giving the users a say of like, if they see something, if it's really considered toxic to them, et cetera, just really helping us narrow that down. And then like the third thing that I've been playing around with that we're actually going to launch is we're calling it internally community training, but we're going to figure out what it's actually going to be called. But basically, a lot of these communities will kind of ban you if you do anything that goes against their community guidelines, which is currently what we do. We kind of have like a one strike policy, you're out. However, what we're realizing is that it's not going to help the problem if these people just go elsewhere online. So we're doing something that's kind of like a redemption community training, to where it's like if the person has done something that violates our policies, if they want to rejoin the community, they have to go through this little training. It's just like, it's nothing crazy. It's like a little flip book of just like, oh, like this is why you shouldn't send your eggplant to somebody
Yeah, yeah.
on the platform, or this is why, I don't know, this is wrong and you should accept people's pronouns, and like going through that. And I think, I mean, it's something that's experimental, but I really feel like it could be something that truly makes a difference if people are realizing like, oh, like I didn't know this, or like I didn't see why this was wrong, but maybe through our community training, they could see why it's wrong. So that's like kind of like the hypothesis that we're kind of testing right now, is like if we kind of greet these people kind of where they're at and really like just give them the training that they may not have gotten elsewhere, then maybe they will realize that like, oh, like this isn't something that I should be doing, and I want to be a part of this community, and it could probably make a change in the future of fandom. So that's the hypothesis.
So, I could probably talk to you forever. I'm having a lot of fun, but I do want to like wrap this up pretty soon. One of the things that I do want to talk about is, I don't know how recent this is. It looks like June, but you received a boost from a company called the Black Ambition Initiative. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Oh, that is like the win of 2021 for our team. For those who don't know, Black Ambition is the VC firm that Pharrell Williams has started. So the nerd Pharrell Williams, Happy, however you know him, I know him as like NERD.
Yep.
So that was so that's been so great. But it's so funny about that opportunity. One thing that I realized is that I needed to continue to apply for these opportunities, even if I didn't think I was qualified for them. I almost didn't apply, and I remember actually applying to it, I think on like the last day, because it was like kind of an application of like, if you want us to consider your company, you can apply here. And I did, of course, didn't hear back for months. And then they sent up a follow-up email of like, oh, like if you, like basically you kind of moved on to the next round, here's your supplementary application. And even from that, like they followed up with me like 2 times to tell me to send it. Cause I was like, oh, like this is a mistake. Like, I'm probably not going to get any further than this. Like, I think because of just the hardships of 2020, I honestly did get a bit discouraged. Like that was like my lowest year, just because I kind of had to start over with my team. I had to furlough some members because we had built our basically our business model from conventions, and since they were all gone, it was like I had to figure out how we were going to make money again. And I just remember being like, oh, I don't know if this is really going to work out. But then I found out that not only were they investing in us, but we got one of the top prizes, $250K from Pharrell, and we've been able to be a part of their network, which has been an amazing network. They're so connected. And just from that, it's been really great for our company. Just, of course, being associated with someone as cool and nerdy as Pharrell, but also, of course, the funding has allowed me to hire more people, and hiring more people means that a better product is coming. So it's been a big boost, and I'm super excited for it.
That's pretty fantastic. And yeah, I'm sure that like that definitely boosted your team and the morale. But there's something that you sort of talked about that I kind of wanted to bring up anyway. So I happened to listen to a podcast that you recorded a year ago, and in the podcast you talked about limiting your limiting beliefs, and
Yeah.
how you talked about, like you mentioned the connection of those limiting beliefs to perhaps leftover stuff from childhood. And you said previous versions of ourselves, which is something that was a phrase I absolutely love. I have some limiting beliefs as well, and I would love to hear a little bit more about what I'd love for you to explain what a limiting belief is, and how you mentioned that you kind of wake up every day and have to I guess sort of fight that, right?
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, I think and thinking of limiting beliefs, I really think of like anything that's kind of been ingrained in you that may limit your outlook on the world. For example, some people, even on my team, have had limiting beliefs. It's like, oh, like, but we're a Black company, we can't do that. That's what the white companies do, etc. And my limiting beliefs, they could even be more subtle of just, I think a lot of limiting beliefs are around money, to where it's like, oh, like, yeah, like I would never be able to afford that, or just like, oh, money doesn't grow on trees, things like that, to where it's just like money is like this finite thing. And that's like something that I didn't realize. Like, it always felt like, even though my parents, like, they were like middle class, for some reason it always felt like we couldn't afford that. We didn't have money to do a certain thing, or like there was just such a limitation with money. And it wasn't until I was talking to one of my investors that she told me that I needed to address my limiting beliefs. Even when it came to the money that she was giving me, I just thought of like, oh, like I can't spend this, or I need to like hold on to this because who knows when the next check will come. And that was a limiting belief that I've had, because I've been working since I was 14 years old, to where it's like I had a check solid every 2 weeks. And then when I quit my job, it was like, when is the next check going to come? Like, I need to figure out that. And that was something that I realized was really limiting the way that I was operating. I was operating like I was lacking, as opposed to really working in a way to where the company could flourish. And I had a pretty big breakdown in 2020. I think after I had to let go of my team members, like, they were understanding, but like I just felt like I had failed the company. Also, just trying to figure out how we were going to make funding again, or make money again, and then also trying to like get investors to invest during a very uncertain time. I completely broke down, to where that was like actually one of the first times that I got into therapy. And I grew up with parents that like did not believe in therapy, did not believe in any type of medication. So I really had to fight through that, of just like, I need this. Like, I really need to do that. So I got first into group therapy with other there was like this opportunity that came. I feel like the universe can like really work in a way that like supports you if you like admit that you need help. So I just remember going through my mind of like, you know what, I need help. I don't know how I'm gonna get it. I don't know exactly what type of help that I need, but I know like something's got to change. And then I got an email from one of my investors about group therapy for CEOs, which I was like, this is exactly what I need at the moment, because I need other people who can understand the issues that I'm dealing with to talk to. So that was like my first step on like a mental health journey. From there, I got recommended to read the book, You're a Badass at Making Money. And from that book, I was like, oh, like, she listed out all of the limiting beliefs that people tend to have about money. And I was like, I have at least 5 of these. Like, I need to do something different. And just even talking about money and budgeting really scared me. And but then from like going to therapy, reading that book, and then really searching like other people's thoughts on limiting beliefs about money, I realized that I could change my beliefs. And like it all went down to like the words that I was saying, the way that I was planning, and really just believing that the universe could support me. So that's something, but it's still something that I have to do every day. Like, this year was the first year that I got on medication for anxiety, and it's been very helpful, but something that was super taboo in my mind beforehand. And just every day, it's really a reminder of like, you got this, girl. Like, you're doing something that's a little bit out there. It's not as safe as some others, but like, you're also not doing something horrible. Like, you're not like laundering money or trying to sell drugs or something. Like, you're just trying to build a geeky community. Like, come on. Yeah. And I think I need that reminder all the time. And I feel like other people need that reminder when they're building something, of like, you're building something for a need, you're doing good. Like, as long as you're doing good for the universe, like, you will be supported in that. You may need to pivot. It may not always look great, but like, you're gonna do something awesome.
Thank you so much for having this moment of vulnerability. I really appreciate it. And I love that you shared and you felt open enough to share. I appreciate that as well.
Of course. Yes. This feels like a safe space. Science
good.
Be a safe space. So yes.
Yes. It's definitely a safe space. So from cytogenetic technologist to queen of Quirktastic, CEO, right? The lessons that we've really learned today is just a lot about being brave. So I actually want to wrap up our conversation. And in that same podcast, you mentioned, or you asked people to do a journaling prompt, right? And the journaling prompt was, "What does a happy life look like now?" And so I am asking B, what does a happy life look like now at this moment? And of course that can change, and I hope it does change, growth and all that. But like, what does that look like for you right now?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Throwing it back on me. Let's see. Yeah. A happy life for me looks like being around and being able to spend time with the people that I love. I'm realizing that that's a lot more important than what I can achieve. Like, I'm trying to just retrain myself that I don't have to be productive all the time, but also just really serving the mission that I want to do, which is build a really awesome community for people who are into nerdy stuff. And for QuirkChat will IPO one day on the New York Stock Exchange. So when that happens, you'll know that that is probably going to be the happiest day of my life thus far. But yeah, that, and also eating good food, because I love food.
I hope that this is like the start of constant communication for us.
Without a doubt, I hope that we continue to talk, and this is awesome. And maybe have me on again. Who knows?
I would love to, because I have to talk to you. Like, I need a whole half an hour to talk to you about your move to Tulsa.
Oh yeah.
And maybe at some point I'll put a link somewhere. This is the first time I'm doing this, so I don't know where the links go for YouTube, but I'll put a link somewhere about the Tulsa. So I don't even know, it's experiment. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Tulsa remote, but we have to have you come back on and talk about that. And hopefully this project of mine will still be going, but I cannot thank you enough for joining me, for being a part of this really important pivot in the rockstar anthropologist and where we hope to go in the future. And I'm just so honored that you gave your time and energy and your vulnerability to this space and place at this time. Thanks so much, B.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. You're absolutely a rock star.
Thank you.